Welcome to Shadow Frames, where forgotten images reveal their darkest secrets. The photograph appears unremarkable at first glance, a sepia-toned group portrait from 1906, showing the choir of St. Augustine's Church in Millfield, standing in their formal positions before the altar. 28 men and women in their Sunday best, arranged in neat rows, their expressions appropriately solemn for a church portrait of the Edwardian era. The choir director, Mr. Hollis, stands at the far left, his posture rigid, hands clasped before him. The women wear high-necked blouses with cameo brooches, their hair pinned severely beneath modest hats. The men stand stiffly in dark suits and starched collars, each face betraying the long exposure time with a slight blur of movement, except one. In the back row, third from the right, stands Miss Eleanor Webb. Her image is crystal clear, her eyes staring directly into the camera with peculiar intensity. While the others show the slight softness of movement, she appears unnaturally still, almost as if she were a painted figure inserted into the photograph rather than a living subject. What makes this photograph remarkable is not what it shows, but what we know happened just moments after it was taken. According to the parish records, the choir had gathered that December evening for their annual Christmas portrait, followed by a rehearsal of holiday hymns. The photographer, having completed his work, was packing his equipment when the choir began their practice with "Angels We Have Heard on High." They never finished the first verse. Witnesses reported that Miss Webb suddenly clutched her chest, gasped once, and collapsed. The choir fell silent in shock and confusion. Mr. Hollis rushed to her side, but it was too late. Eleanor Webb had died instantly of what doctors later determined was heart failure. But what transformed this tragedy into local legend was what happened next. As the stunned choir members stood in silence, the final notes of the hymn continued. A single voice, unmistakably Eleanor's, completed the Gloria refrain, the pure soprano notes echoing through the empty church. 7 witnesses, including the pastor and the photographer, signed affidavits testifying to this impossible occurrence. The voice continued for perhaps 10 seconds after Miss Webb had plainly expired in Mr. Hollis's arms. Most disturbing is what parish records reveal about Eleanor Webb. She had been acting strangely for weeks before her death, claiming to hear voices calling her name in the empty church. She told the minister's wife that something was waiting for her in the choir loft. The photograph itself became notorious in the village. 3 choir members refused to continue with the group after that night. The church organist claimed that on quiet evenings, she could hear faint singing from the empty choir loft. What forces bound Eleanor Webb's voice to this world momentarily after her departure from it? And why does her image alone appear so unnaturally clear, as if she were already something other than human when the camera captured her likeness? 7 years after Eleanor Webb's death, photographic postcards of the choir portrait began appearing mysteriously in Millfield shops. No one claimed responsibility for producing them. The shopkeepers found small stacks left overnight, often with a single penny placed beside them, an eerie calling card. The image had been subtly altered. Eleanor Webb now appeared luminous against the somber backdrop, her face capturing the light in ways that defied photographic techniques of the era. These postcards became objects of morbid fascination. Some residents framed them as curios, others burned them immediately. 3 families who displayed the portrait reported hearing faint soprano notes in their homes, always in the deepest hours of night. Mrs. Constance Hollis, the choir director's wife, kept a detailed journal during this period. Her entries document the strange phenomena that followed the choir's decimation. "The church has never felt the same," she wrote in 1908. "Thomas insists on continuing the choir, though it's half its former size. No one will stand in Eleanor's former position. The space remains empty every Sunday, though Thomas never speaks of it." The most disturbing account came from Reverend Middleton himself. In 1913, during a private evening prayer, he claimed to have seen the choir loft filled with translucent figures, all in the positions of the original choir members. They performed in perfect silence, mouths moving without sound, except for Eleanor Webb, whose voice alone carried the melody of "Angels We Have Heard on High." Historian Margaret Peller discovered while researching church records that the choir loft itself had been constructed in 1873 after a fire that claimed 9 lives during a Christmas service. The names of those victims had been carved into the wooden beam supporting the loft, directly above where Eleanor Webb always stood. Further investigation revealed something even more unsettling. Eleanor had joined the choir just 6 weeks before her death, taking the position of Rebecca Thorne, who had moved away rather suddenly. Parish records showed that in the 5 years prior to Eleanor's joining, 4 different women had occupied that same position in the choir. None stayed longer than 8 months. Each reported hearing voices or feeling watched during rehearsals. The church organ, imported from Austria in 1880, became increasingly difficult to maintain after Eleanor's death. Keys would stick or play unbidden during silent prayer. The instrument was eventually replaced in 1922, but the original was never successfully removed from the church. 4 workmen were injured during the attempted extraction when a supporting beam inexplicably collapsed. The choir of St. Augustine's never regained its former glory. By 1930, it had disbanded entirely. The church itself closed during the Depression years, only to reopen with a modernized interior. The choir loft was removed, its wood repurposed for the new pulpit. Yet even now, elderly residents of Millfield claim that during Christmas services, when the congregation sings "Angels We Have Heard on High," one haunting soprano voice rises above all others during the Gloria, a voice that should not be there, but persists, eternal as the photograph that captured Eleanor Webb's final living moments, and perhaps the beginning of something else. The photograph found its way to the Millfield Historical Society in 1954, donated anonymously in a cedar box lined with faded velvet. Curator Josephine Bartlett documented its arrival with characteristic precision, noting the unusual cold spot surrounding the box that persisted for days despite the building's reliable heating system. Restoration specialist Martin Crowe was the first to notice something peculiar about the physical properties of the image. In his meticulous notes, he observed that the portion of the photograph containing Eleanor Webb's image refused to deteriorate at the same rate as the rest. While chemicals had begun breaking down the emulsion in other areas, her figure remained pristine, the silver halides somehow resistant to both time and environment. "It defies scientific explanation," he wrote. "The photographic paper itself seems to possess different properties in this specific region, as though Miss Webb's image exists on a different substrate altogether." More curious still were the findings when the Historical Society attempted to create duplicate copies for preservation. In every reproduction attempt, Eleanor's figure became increasingly prominent, while other choir members appeared to recede into shadow. By the 5th-generation copy, only Eleanor remained clearly visible, the others reduced to indistinct silhouettes. The technical anomalies drew the attention of Dr. Eliza Winters, a researcher specializing in historical photography from Cambridge University. Her examination in 1962 yielded disturbing results. Using newly developed spectrographic analysis, she detected an unusual pattern of light reflection in Eleanor's eyes that suggested they were photographed while dilated to an inhuman degree. The pupils appear to be fully expanded beyond physiological possibility, Dr. Winters noted. This effect cannot be produced in a living subject without specialized chemicals unknown in 1906 photography. Winters also interviewed Millfield's oldest resident, Thomas Keene, who had been an altar boy at St. Augustine's. Now in his 90s, Keene spoke lucidly about events he had witnessed as a child of 12. "The choir never sang the same after Miss Webb passed," he recounted. "They tried, Lord knows they tried, but something was missing, or rather, something extra was present that shouldn't have been. During rehearsals, they'd sometimes stop mid-hymn, everyone hearing the same thing but too frightened to acknowledge it. A single soprano note, held impossibly long, hovering after their voices ceased." Keene claimed that Eleanor's grave in the church cemetery remained peculiarly bare. While neighboring plots sprouted weeds and wildflowers freely, nothing would grow over her resting place. Local children developed a test of courage involving standing on her grave at midnight and attempting to sing the first bars of "Angels We Have Heard on High." None ever completed it, Keene whispered. Something always interrupted, a sudden wind, an inexplicable noise. One boy in 1922 claimed a hand had seized his ankle. He never spoke again after that night. Perhaps most telling was the fate of the choir members themselves. Parish records revealed that of the 27 other individuals in the photograph, 23 died before their time. Accidents, sudden illnesses, and in 4 cases, suicide. All within 15 years of that fateful December evening. The sole survivor, choir director Thomas Hollis, lived to the extraordinary age of 104, though he never again directed any musical ensemble. When asked about his longevity, he would only say, I hear her every night, still practicing. She won't let me rest until I get it right. In 1978, the Millfield Historical Society reluctantly loaned the photograph for a traveling exhibition on paranormal photography. During its 6-month absence, an extraordinary phenomenon occurred. The choir members still living in Millfield reported improved health and relief from chronic ailments that had plagued them for decades. 3 former choristers in nursing homes suddenly regained lucidity, each independently mentioning they no longer heard Eleanor's practicing at night. When the photograph returned, these improvements reversed within days. The exhibition curator, Dr. Sylvia Morgan, noted something that previous examiners had overlooked. Using ultraviolet photography, she discovered minute text scratched into the photographic paper beneath Eleanor's image, invisible to the naked eye. The Latin phrase canticum aeternum appeared in a delicate script, the eternal song. This discovery coincided with a startling development at St. Augustine's former site. The church had been demolished in 1967, replaced by a community center. During renovations in 1980, workers unearthed a small tin box beneath what would have been the precise location of Eleanor's choir position. Inside lay a tarnished silver tuning fork and a yellowed sheet of music, a hand-transcribed version of "Angels We Have Heard on High," with modifications to the Gloria refrain. The alterations created an unusual harmonic pattern that musicologist Dr. James Harrington described as designed to create sympathetic vibrations in architectural spaces, essentially turning the entire church into an acoustic instrument. Most disturbing was the handwriting analysis, which confirmed the sheet was penned by Eleanor Webb herself, despite church records indicating she couldn't read music and sang by ear. The library archives yielded another revelation. Before becoming St. Augustine's, the land had housed a pagan temple dedicated to Euterpe, the Greek muse of music. Local folklore specialist Dr. Hannah Mills uncovered accounts suggesting rituals there involved binding singers to the site to ensure eternal worship through their voices. In 1992, audio engineer Vincent Powell attempted an experimental restoration of a wax cylinder recording made at St. Augustine's in 1905, the Christmas before Eleanor's death. Using advanced filtering techniques, he isolated what appeared to be an anomalous voice beneath the choir's performance, a haunting counterpoint melody that shouldn't exist in traditional hymn arrangements. It's as if someone was already singing a harmony that nobody else could hear, Powell noted in his findings, a voice that seems to anticipate the notes before the choir reaches them. The photograph itself continued its inexplicable evolution. By 2000, Eleanor's figure had become so prominent that she appeared to stand slightly forward of the choir, though original accounts confirmed she had been positioned in the back row. Spectroscopic analysis showed her image reflecting light wavelengths that shouldn't be present in period photography. The most recent examiner, conservator Dr. Pauline Whitaker, refused to complete her assessment in 2014, withdrawing from the project after reporting that while working alone with the photograph after hours, she distinctly heard female humming coming from the image, followed by a whispered invitation to join our eternal choir. The voice, she insisted, promised that those who sang with Eleanor need never stop the music. The photograph disappeared in 2018, vanishing from its temperature-controlled display case despite multiple security measures. Cameras recorded nothing. Only static appeared during the 17-minute window when it must have been taken. The alarm system registered no breaches. 3 months later, music teacher Emily Harrington purchased a vintage frame at the Millfield Antique Fair, discovering the infamous choir portrait concealed behind a landscape painting. As the great-granddaughter of James Harrington, the musicologist who had studied Eleanor's modified Gloria, Emily recognized it immediately. It felt warm to the touch, she later told investigators, and heavier than it should have been, as though the paper itself had somehow gained mass. Emily's expertise in vocal arrangement led her to a discovery her great-grandfather had missed. The modified Gloria notation in Eleanor's sheet music wasn't merely designed to resonate with the church architecture. It created a mathematical pattern that musicologists call a sonic lock. These specific frequency combinations have appeared across different cultures throughout history, explained Dr. Victor Chen of the Institute for Acoustic Anthropology. Some ancient Greek temples, Gothic cathedrals, and even certain prehistoric stone circles share acoustic properties that amplify these exact harmonic sequences. Emily began experiencing vivid dreams featuring Eleanor Webb soon after the photograph came into her possession. In each dream, Eleanor stood in an endless choir loft that stretched into darkness, surrounded by shadowy singers. She would turn to Emily with an expression of desperate pleading, mouthing words that Emily couldn't hear. Using contemporary spectrographic software, Emily analyzed the surviving fragments of the 1905 wax cylinder recording. Below the audible choir voices, she detected an infrasonic pattern, sound waves below human hearing range that nonetheless affect the nervous system and can induce feelings of unease or reverence. These particular frequencies match those used in certain ritualistic traditions meant to thin the veil between worlds, noted religious historian Dr. Abigail Foster. They're essentially doorways opened through sound. The Millfield Town Archives yielded one final piece of the puzzle, Eleanor Webb's death certificate, which listed her age as 29, conflicting with parish records stating she was 23. Further investigation revealed that Eleanor Webb had appeared in 3 different choir photographs across England between 1873 and 1906, each time appearing nearly identical despite the decades between them. In each case, the choir experienced a similar pattern, a mysterious death, followed by hauntings centered on a specific musical piece. Emily made the fateful decision to recreate Eleanor's modified Gloria during the winter solstice of 2019, assembling a small ensemble in the community center built over St. Augustine's foundations. Recording equipment captured the session's chilling conclusion. As the final notes faded, a momentary silence fell before a single soprano voice continued alone, though no soprano was present. On the recording, barely audible beneath this impossible voice, a chorus of whispers can be heard. Join us. The song never ends here. The photograph now hangs in Emily's studio, substantially altered from its original form. Eleanor Webb no longer stands in the back row but appears centered before the choir, arms outstretched as if conducting. Behind her, the faces of the original choristers have changed. Their expressions now appear ecstatic, eyes closed in rapture or opened impossibly wide. And Emily has begun composing modifications to other hymns. Working through the night, her students reporting that they sometimes hear her practicing duets alone in her studio, singing both parts simultaneously. The photograph resurfaced again in 2021 when Emily Harrington's studio was found abandoned. Neighbors reported hearing extraordinary choral performances from the building for several nights before her disappearance. Impossible harmonies that seemed to require dozens of voices, though Emily had been alone. Among her possessions, investigators discovered 5 new musical compositions based on traditional hymns, each featuring the same mathematical patterns as Eleanor's modified Gloria. Music theorist Dr. Nathan Blackwell described them as architectural blueprints expressed through sound, noting that when played simultaneously, the compositions created a perfect acoustic model of St. Augustine's original structure. "It's as if she was rebuilding the church through sound waves," he explained, creating a space that exists not physically, but acoustically. Most disturbing was the journal Emily left behind. Her neat handwriting gradually transformed over months, becoming identical to the script found on Eleanor's original sheet music. The final entries described what she called the true choir, an ensemble that existed in a place between resonance and silence. "Eleanor was never trapped," Emily wrote. "She was the doorway. The choir doesn't serve the church. The church was built to serve the choir. They've been singing since before human voices existed, and they require our throats to be heard in this world." Audio analysis of local emergency calls revealed something unexpected. 4 different Millfield residents had dialed emergency services on the night of Emily's disappearance, each reporting a tremendous noise that felt like the air itself was vibrating. A spectrographic examination of these calls captured fragments of what acousticians term a standing wave event, a phenomenon where sound creates stable patterns in physical space. The phenomenon spread beyond Millfield. Reports emerged of choir directors across the country discovering Emily's compositions anonymously left in their rehearsal spaces. 3 choirs attempted to perform these pieces with troubling results. Singers described feeling someone else using my voice during performances, and audience members reported seeing additional figures standing among the performers. The Leicester University Physics Department recorded one such performance, documenting a measurable drop in ambient temperature and unusual electromagnetic fluctuations that peaked precisely during the Gloria sections. Most tellingly, their equipment registered 29 distinct vocal signatures despite the choir having only 23 members. Professor Emerita Diane Holcomb, a cognitive neuroscientist specializing in the brain's response to music, examined singers who had performed Emily's arrangements. Their neural scans showed unusual activity in regions associated with spatial awareness and presence recognition. These individuals' brains behave as though they're constantly in the presence of others, even when alone, Holcomb explained. They've developed what appears to be a form of shared consciousness that manifests most strongly during singing. The most recent development came when construction workers preparing to demolish the Millfield Community Center discovered a sealed room that appeared on no architectural plans. Inside, they found walls covered with musical notations written in what appeared to be dried brown pigment. Chemical analysis identified it as human blood from multiple donors, dating back decades. At the center of the room stood a simple wooden lectern holding a book bound in pale leather. The book contained names, hundreds of them, with dates spanning from ancient Rome to the present day. The final entry, written in Emily Harrington's hand but signed Eleanor, read simply, "The choir grows." The next conductor is chosen. The eternal song continues. The photograph continues its journey through curious hands. In 2023, renowned audiologist Dr. Meredith Saunders acquired it after attending an estate auction where Emily Harrington's belongings were quietly liquidated. Saunders had tracked the choir phenomenon as a side interest to her work studying infrasonic frequencies and their effects on human cognition. Upon bringing the photograph to her laboratory, Saunders made an unprecedented discovery. Using specialized equipment designed to detect the minutest vibrations, she recorded constant microscopic oscillations emanating from the paper itself. The photograph was, in the most literal sense, humming. The vibrations occur at exactly 29 distinct frequencies, her research notes state. These correspond perfectly to the 29 vocal ranges documented in the Leicester University study, including the 6 voices that shouldn't have existed. What further alarmed Saunders was how these vibrations affected organic material. Plants placed near the photograph grew in unnatural patterns, their stems bending toward it regardless of light sources. More disturbing were the laboratory mice, which arranged themselves in neat rows facing the image during rest periods, their breathing synchronized. During one late-night session, Saunders documented another progression in the photograph's evolution. She observed minuscule movements within the image, not deterioration of the photographic material, but deliberate changes in positioning. Using time-lapse photography, she confirmed that over 7 days, the choir members had rearranged themselves into a perfect semicircle around Eleanor Webb, who now appeared to stand in a conductor's stance. The subjects no longer face the camera, she noted. They face her. Meanwhile, the former site of St. Augustine's yielded new secrets. Ground-penetrating radar surveys, conducted after the discovery of the sealed room, revealed a network of narrow chambers beneath the foundations, arranged in a pattern that musicologists recognized as a visual representation of Eleanor's modified Gloria, when mapped to standard notation. The chambers were inaccessible until an unprecedented series of small seismic events, precisely 29 minor tremors over 3 days, created fissures in the basement floor. Urban explorer Cassandra Patel managed to capture 40 minutes of footage in the chambers before her equipment failed. The walls were covered with names, thousands upon thousands, carved in spiral patterns that created acoustic amplification points at specific junctions. Most telling was Patel's final recording. As she reached the central chamber, her headlamp illuminated a circular space with perfect acoustics, where whispers from the entrance echoed with crystal clarity. There, on the floor, lay hundreds of tuning forks arranged in concentric circles, each one vibrating gently without any apparent force acting upon them. "Someone's singing down here," Patel whispers in her final recording. It sounds like everyone." The footage ends with Patel turning towards something off camera, her expression transforming from fear to recognition, then to a strange, serene acceptance. Her final words, barely audible above the growing hum of the tuning forks. "I understand now. The choir was never meant to end." Cassandra Patel was never found. Her equipment was recovered near the entrance, but thermal imaging shows no human presence in the chambers below. Yet seismic monitors continue to detect rhythmic vibrations from deep beneath the site, vibrations that precisely match the frequencies emanating from the photograph now secured in Dr. Saunders' laboratory. where she has begun to transcribe melodies she insists she's never heard before. An unusual archaeological discovery in 2024 has irrevocably linked the St. Augustine's phenomenon to sites across Europe. During restoration work at Canterbury Cathedral, workers uncovered a hidden chamber containing a collection of photographs, 29 in total, each showing different choirs from different eras, dating back to the invention of photography. In every image, despite the varying locations and time periods, Eleanor Webb's face appears among the singers. More remarkable still was the discovery of pre-photographic paintings and sketches showing choir arrangements from the 16th through 19th centuries. Art historians identified a recurring figure whose features, despite the stylistic changes across centuries, maintained a striking consistency. The same high cheekbones, intense gaze, and slight asymmetry of the lips that characterized Eleanor Webb. Dr. Saunders collaborated with musicologist Dr. Helena Vasquez to analyze medieval musical manuscripts found alongside these images. They discovered that certain notations previously dismissed as scribal errors were actually deliberate modifications, the same mathematical pattern found in Eleanor's Gloria arrangement. These aren't 29 separate incidents, Dr. Vasquez concluded in her preliminary report. This is one continuous event expressing itself repeatedly across time. Radio astronomers from the Greenwich Observatory made an accidental contribution to the mystery when their equipment detected unusual harmonic patterns emanating from the vicinity of Dr. Saunders' laboratory. These frequencies, when mapped against stellar data, aligned perfectly with the vibrational signature of a distant pulsar that completes 29 rotations per minute, a celestial object that has been broadcasting the exact acoustic pattern of Eleanor's modified Gloria into space for an estimated 17,000 years. The photograph itself has undergone its most dramatic transformation yet. The choir members now appear translucent, their features increasingly indistinct, while Eleanor Webb has gained a dimensional quality that creates the illusion of emerging from the paper's surface. Specialized photography reveals that her image now absorbs rather than reflects light, a physical impossibility that defies scientific explanation. Most troubling are the reports from 3 separate nighttime security guards at Dr. Saunders' laboratory, each describing the same experience, hearing a woman's voice softly counting in Latin during their shifts. The counting always reaches Viginti Novum, 29, before beginning again. Each guard independently reported feeling an overwhelming urge to respond to the counting with song. Dr. Saunders herself has begun wearing specialized hearing protection in the laboratory, claiming that prolonged exposure to the photograph has made her increasingly sensitive to certain frequencies. "I hear them everywhere now," she admitted in a private correspondence. In traffic noise, in rainfall, in ordinary conversation, the 29 tones weaving through everyday sounds, forming patterns that shouldn't exist. Her latest journal entries reveal a growing obsession with what she terms the recruitment hypothesis, the theory that Eleanor Webb is not a victim of supernatural forces but rather their emissary, selected to assemble a specific configuration of voices for some purpose beyond human understanding. "The questions we've been asking are wrong," Saunders wrote. "This isn't about why Eleanor Webb remained after death. It's about what she's preparing for, and why she needs exactly 29 voices to complete her eternal choir." The phenomenon has transcended mere geographical boundaries. In 2025, synchronous choir performances spontaneously erupted in 29 cities across 5 continents, each featuring Eleanor's modified Gloria, despite no coordination between the groups. Witnesses described the same inexplicable acoustics, voices seeming to multiply beyond the number of visible singers, creating harmonies that shouldn't be physically possible in those spaces. Dr. Saunders' deteriorating mental state became apparent during a virtual conference with colleagues. Mid-presentation, she abruptly began singing a counterpoint to her own speaking voice while remaining unaware of doing so. The recording shows her continuing her scientific explanation, while a perfect soprano line emerges simultaneously from the same throat, 2 distinct vocalizations impossible from a single larynx. The photograph, now secured in a lead-lined vault at the Institute for Anomalous Materials, has begun affecting electronic equipment. Devices within 30 feet experience power fluctuations corresponding precisely to the rhythm of Eleanor's Gloria. More disturbing, voice assistants and smart speakers spontaneously activate to record the silence, later playing back audio files containing what sound engineers describe as choral breathing, the synchronized inhalations of many singers preparing to perform. Professor Raymond Chen, a quantum physicist with no previous connection to the investigation, contacted Dr. Vasquez after experiencing troubling dreams featuring Eleanor Webb. Despite never having seen the photograph, he produced sketches of her that matched her appearance with unsettling accuracy. His expertise in dimensional physics led him to propose an alarming theory. Music creates standing wave patterns in space-time, his paper suggests. Certain harmonic configurations could theoretically create resonances between different temporal points, or even between dimensional planes. The 29 frequencies in this specific arrangement appear mathematically designed to establish a stable conduit. Archaeological teams working at sites with known connections to the choir phenomenon have reported identical findings at each location. Chambers with acoustic properties that amplify specific frequencies while dampening others, creating what sound engineers term frequency windows that allow certain tones to propagate with supernatural clarity. Most concerning is what happened during the winter solstice of 2025. 29 former choir members who had previously been exposed to Eleanor's music, from groups spanning decades and continents, vanished from their homes simultaneously. Investigation revealed that each had been drawing the same symbol repeatedly in the days before their disappearance, a spiral pattern of musical notation that, when decoded, forms instructions for reaching a specific harmonic convergence. The families reported identical final messages from their missing loved ones. I've been chosen to help complete the pattern. The 29th voice was always the hardest to find. Dr. Saunders, before her mandatory medical leave, recorded her final observation. Eleanor isn't collecting voices. She's assembling keys. Each unique vocal signature unlocks a portion of something larger. We've been asking what happens when the choir is complete. I now believe we should be asking what happens when the door they're opening finally unlocks. The photograph's true origins have finally been uncovered. An aging librarian in Vienna contacted Dr. Vasquez after reading about the choir phenomenon in an academic journal. Among her family's papers was a 19th-century diary belonging to her great-grandfather Anton Weiss, a craftsman who specialized in custom photographic chemicals during the medium's infancy. The diary, written in faded German script, detailed Weiss's relationship with a peculiar client, a woman who commissioned a unique emulsion formula using ingredients that disturbed him deeply. She required silver nitrate infused with elements he described as harvested from the throat of a dying singer and dust from beneath the keys of an ancient church organ. Most troubling were Weiss's descriptions of the woman herself. She speaks with unusual cadence, as though constantly counting silently between words. Her voice contains harmonics I cannot explain, tones that seem to resonate from elsewhere. When she hums, I feel compelled to join her, though the melodies are like nothing I have heard in this world. The woman identified herself only as Eleanor, and insisted the emulsion would capture, not merely the subject's image, but their resonant essence. Weiss completed the commission but was so disturbed by the final product that he refused payment and documented the formula solely as a warning to future generations. Chemical analysis of residue taken from the photograph's surface confirms compounds impossible to explain through conventional 19th-century photography, including trace elements of osmium, which was unknown to photographic processes of the era. More puzzling still are the microscopic crystalline structures embedded in the emulsion that vibrate in response to specific audio frequencies. Dr. Mei Zhang, an acoustical crystallographer, has identified these structures as remarkably similar to natural formations found in only 2 locations on Earth: the salt caves beneath the Bavarian village of Berchtesgaden and the limestone formations near Sarnano, Italy. Historical records indicate both sites housed ancient temples dedicated to forgotten deities associated with the music beyond the veil. Interviews with elderly residents of these regions revealed parallel folklore about the choir that walks between worlds, 29 entities that require human voices to maintain their presence in our reality. According to these traditions, the entities cannot remain here without constantly refreshing their connection through song, with each voice matching a specific harmonic signature needed to maintain the link. Most chilling is the revelation that in both traditions, the completion of the choir heralds not merely communication between worlds, but a permanent bridge, allowing what waits beyond to cross over entirely. Parish records from across Europe, when cross-referenced with the appearance of Eleanor's likeness throughout history, reveal a pattern previously missed. Each manifestation occurred approximately 29 years after the previous one, and each involved vocal music composed in similar harmonic structures. The current manifestation breaks this pattern, appearing significantly ahead of schedule and with unprecedented strength. Whatever cycle has governed these appearances for centuries seems to be accelerating toward some culmination. Dr. Zhang's final observation may be the most disturbing. The photograph isn't a record of what happened that day in 1906. It's an instrument designed to resonate with and amplify specific frequencies, a tuning fork between worlds, waiting for the right voices to complete its purpose. The photograph's journey took an unexpected turn when it arrived at the Berkeley Sound Research Laboratory in early 2026. Dr. Anita Sharma, a specialist in psychoacoustics, had convinced the institute to allow controlled testing after proposing a theory connecting the choir phenomenon to rare neurological conditions affecting auditory processing. Her initial experiments yielded nothing until she placed the photograph in a specially constructed anechoic chamber, a room designed to eliminate all external sound and electromagnetic interference. Within this perfect silence, something extraordinary happened. The chamber's sensitive recording equipment captured what Dr. Sharma described as conversational fragments emanating directly from the photograph itself. The recordings contained 29 distinct voices speaking simultaneously in different languages, creating a multilingual overlay that initially seemed like meaningless babble. Linguistic analysis revealed something profoundly unsettling. Each voice was reciting the same text in different languages, some of which have been extinct for centuries. Translation of these fragments revealed a text describing what appears to be a ritual called the convergence of voices, which must occur when the stars align in the 29th configuration. According to this text, the ritual requires 29 singers whose vocal signatures match specific harmonic patterns identical to those found in Eleanor's modified Gloria. What we're hearing isn't random, Dr. Sharma explained in her research notes. These are instructions, a manual for completing whatever process was begun centuries ago. Further experimentation revealed another disturbing property. When subjected to specific sound frequencies, the photograph briefly becomes translucent, revealing a hidden image beneath the choir portrait. What appears to be a vast, cathedral-like space that architectural historians confirm matches no known structure on Earth. The proportions of this phantom architecture precisely mirror the mathematical ratios found in Eleanor's musical modifications. Perhaps most concerning was the discovery made by Dr. Sharma's assistant, Marcus Way. While digitally enhancing the background details of the photograph, he identified a page of sheet music visible on the church altar behind the choir. When reconstructed, this music contains a final section that none of the known versions of Eleanor's arrangements include, a coda marked to be performed only when the 29th voice joins. The musical notation in this coda contains impossible instructions, simultaneous notes that no human vocal range could produce, and directional markings indicating sounds should move inward and between, spatial instructions that have no meaning in conventional music theory. Former choir members who were exposed to Eleanor's music continue to report the same dream, standing in a vast, impossible space, arranged in a circle facing inward, with Eleanor conducting from a central position that somehow exists both inside and outside the circle simultaneously. In the dream, they describe feeling a presence observing them from elsewhere, awaiting the final voice needed to complete the pattern. Dr. Sharma herself has begun to experience auditory hallucinations after prolonged exposure to the photograph. "I hear them rehearsing," she confessed to colleagues. "Not singing the Gloria yet, just preparing, warming up their voices for something much larger. And beneath it all, I hear Eleanor counting, 27, 28, waiting for 29. The extraordinary convergence of events reached its apex yesterday when Millfield experienced what meteorologists are calling an acoustic anomaly, a phenomenon where sound waves created visible disturbances in the atmosphere above the former St. Augustine's site. Witnesses described seeing rippling patterns in the air, similar to heat distortion, but moving with rhythmic precision that matched the cadence of Eleanor's Gloria. Dr. Sharma's research team, monitoring from Berkeley, recorded unprecedented levels of infrasonic activity at exactly 29 global locations simultaneously, each site corresponding to a location where Eleanor's image had previously appeared in choir photographs throughout history. The pattern formed when mapped globally creates a perfect musical staff with each location representing a note in Eleanor's modified arrangement. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source, 13-year-old Lily Chen, Professor Raymond Chen's daughter, who has perfect pitch and synesthesia that allows her to see sounds as colors. When shown the photograph during a routine visit to her father's laboratory, she immediately identified something no adult researcher had noticed. "There's another song hidden underneath," she explained, pointing to spaces between choir members. "Not in the people, but in the gaps between them. They're standing so the spaces form a different piece of music entirely." Music theorists confirmed her observation. The precise arrangement of figures created negative spaces that, when translated to musical notation through a Renaissance technique called spatial counterpoint, revealed an inverted version of the Gloria that functions as a perfect countermelody. "It's ingenious," noted Dr. Vasquez after analyzing the pattern. The choir wasn't just singing. They were physically embodying a musical lock and key system. Their arrangement creates both the question and the answer in harmonic terms. More disturbing was the discovery made when researchers finally analyzed the crystalline structures in the photograph using quantum resonance imaging. The crystals aren't merely vibrating in response to sound. They're storing vibrational patterns, essentially recording the voices of anyone who sings Eleanor's arrangements within hearing distance of the photograph. "It's a collection mechanism," Dr. Zhang concluded. "Every performance adds another layer to whatever is being constructed through these harmonics. The missing 29th voice now appears to serve a specific function." Analysis of the modified Gloria shows that 28 voices create a nearly complete harmonic structure with a single, specific frequency missing. This absence creates what acousticians call a resonant void, a space that amplifies any sound matching the missing frequency when it finally appears. Most remarkable is what happens when this void is artificially filled. In a controlled experiment, Dr. Sharma's team synthesized the missing frequency and played it alongside recordings of 28 human voices performing Eleanor's arrangement. The results were immediate and alarming. The photograph began to physically transform, its surface becoming reflective like a mirror, but showing not the laboratory around it, but glimpses of that vast, impossible cathedral space. For precisely 9 seconds, researchers could see figures moving within this reflection. Shadowy forms arranged in a circle, their mouths moving in perfect synchronization. At their center stood a figure that resembled Eleanor Webb, but with subtle differences that suggested something else, wearing her appearance like a garment. The experiment was terminated when 3 laboratory instruments simultaneously recorded the temperature dropping to -29 degrees Celsius within the photograph's immediate vicinity. Physically impossible given the surrounding conditions, yet undeniably measured by multiple calibrated devices. The photograph reappeared last month in the most unexpected of places, the throat of a patient undergoing routine surgery at Millfield General Hospital. Surgeon Dr. Olivia Trent was removing what appeared to be a benign cyst when she discovered a tightly folded piece of paper lodged in the patient's laryngeal tissue. When unfolded, it contained a miniaturized version of the choir photograph, somehow preserved despite the impossible environment. The patient, 67-year-old Harriet Downing, had never participated in any choir. Her only connection to the phenomenon was being born in the house where Emily Harrington had disappeared. Yet upon examination, otolaryngologists discovered something remarkable. Harriet's vocal anatomy possessed unique structural anomalies that would produce exactly the frequency identified as the missing 29th tone in Eleanor's arrangement. "It's as though her throat was architecturally designed to complete the pattern," Dr. Trent reported. "The positioning of her vocal folds creates resonant chambers that would naturally produce the precise frequency missing from all previous performances." More disturbing still, tissue samples from around the embedded photograph revealed cellular abnormalities. Under microscopic examination, Harriet's laryngeal cells had arranged themselves in patterns matching the musical notation of Eleanor's Gloria. The cells were actively replicating in this pattern despite being removed from her body. "They're behaving more like a crystal structure than human tissue," noted pathologist Dr. Kwan, "growing according to some external organizational principle rather than biological imperatives." Hospital records revealed something equally unsettling. 28 other patients had undergone procedures for throat conditions in the previous month, each exhibiting similar cellular reorganization, though less advanced than Harriet's. All 28 had reported the same dream, standing in choir formation while an unseen conductor counted them, reaching 28 before pointing to an empty space waiting to be filled. Audiologists examining Harriet discovered she possessed something previously thought impossible, a form of reverse perfect pitch, allowing her to precisely replicate any frequency she heard, but only when singing Gloria. This ability had manifested suddenly 3 weeks before her surgery, despite no prior musical training. When played recordings of Eleanor's arrangement with 28 voices, Harriet instinctively began singing the missing part, her voice producing the exact frequency identified in Dr. Sharma's research. Recording equipment malfunctioned during her performance, but witnesses reported seeing the air around her momentarily shimmer, as though reality itself was responding to the completed harmonic pattern. Most telling was what hospital security cameras captured in Harriet's room the night after her surgery. The footage shows her sleeping peacefully until 3:29 a.m., when she suddenly sits upright, eyes still closed. Her mouth begins moving in perfect synchronization with 28 other patients throughout the hospital, all likewise asleep, yet mouthing the same silent words. At precisely the same moment, 29 clocks throughout the hospital stopped, their digital displays frozen at 3:29, while analog clocks showed hands arranged in a pattern that musicologists recognized as a visual representation of Eleanor's modified Gloria when mapped to standard notation. Harriet Downing remains under observation, her voice growing stronger daily despite the invasive surgery on her vocal cords. Hospital staff report hearing her practicing scales during the night, though security footage shows her sleeping soundly through each performance. The denouement arrived with uncanny precision on the 29th day of the 29th month since the photograph's reappearance. Dr. Olivia Trent had assembled an interdisciplinary team to monitor Harriet Downing, whose condition had evolved beyond medical explanation. Her vocal cords now contained crystalline structures identical to those found in the photograph's emulsion, glinting beneath endoscopic examination like stars suspended in organic tissue. At sunset, Harriet began humming Eleanor's Gloria unprompted, her hospital room equipment registering harmonic overtones impossible for a single human voice. Most disturbing was her shadow. Cast against the wall, it showed not one figure, but 29 silhouettes arranged in perfect choir formation. "She's becoming a conduit," whispered Dr. Zhang, monitoring from behind protective glass. Not just for Eleanor, but for all 29 voices. Simultaneously, across 29 global locations where Eleanor's image had appeared throughout history, witnesses reported identical phenomena. Clock faces spontaneously rearranging their hands into musical notation patterns, electronic devices playing fragments of choral music despite being powered off, and most alarmingly, reflective surfaces briefly showing not the rooms they occupied but glimpses of that vast, impossible cathedral space. Dr. Sharma's team had established a frequency-dampening field around Harriet's room, designed to disrupt the specific harmonics of Eleanor's arrangement. It failed catastrophically at precisely 29 minutes past midnight, when every electronic device within the hospital emitted a single, perfect tone, the missing 29th frequency. Hospital security footage captured the extraordinary transformation that followed. The air around Harriet's bed rippled like water, forming concentric circles that expanded outward in perfect rhythm with her breathing. As she opened her mouth to sing, her voice divided into distinct tones, each occupying a different harmonic register, one voice becoming many. Most remarkable was Dr. Trent's final observation before evacuation protocols engaged. The space around Harriet appeared to fold inward, creating what quantum physicists later described as a localized dimensional inversion. For 17 seconds, instruments recorded that the physical laws within that precise location had altered. Gravity reversed, light bent at impossible angles, and most significantly, sound acquired physical properties, becoming visible as crystalline structures that assembled themselves in the air. The choir wasn't building a bridge between worlds, Dr. Trent later testified. They were transforming this one, rewriting its fundamental properties through acoustic manipulation. When emergency teams finally entered the room, they found it meticulously undisturbed except for one extraordinary detail: 29 perfect water droplets arranged on Harriet's bedsheet in the exact pattern of choir members in the original photograph. Each droplet, when analyzed, contained microscopic particles with acoustic properties never before documented in terrestrial chemistry. Harriet Downing herself had vanished, leaving only a single tuning fork on her pillow, vibrating at precisely 29 hertz, a frequency too low for human ears to perceive yet powerful enough to resonate with the structural foundation of the hospital itself. The photograph was gone as well, though its absence created something more troubling than its presence had ever been. A perfect silence that seemed to listen back, waiting for someone else to sing. In the silence that followed Harriet Downing's disappearance, researchers documented an unexpected acoustic phenomenon across Millfield. Residents reported hearing what musicologists termed phantom harmonics, brief moments when ordinary sounds appeared to contain fragments of Eleanor's Gloria. The clinking of silverware, car horns, even casual conversation sometimes produced perfect intervals from the modified arrangement. Dr. Olivia Trent, examining the 29 water droplets left on Harriet's bed, discovered something extraordinary under electron microscopy. Each droplet contained a perfect miniature reproduction of the choir photograph, visible only at 29,000 times magnification. More disturbing still, these microscopic images showed the choir in different arrangements from the original, as if capturing 29 alternate versions of that fateful day. "They're not copies," Dr. Trent explained to her colleagues. "They're windows." The tuning fork left on Harriet's pillow defied conventional physics. When struck, it produced no audible sound, yet caused any reflective surface within 29 feet to briefly show that cathedral space. More concerning was its effect on human tissue. Anyone touching it reported an overwhelming urge to sing, their vocal cords vibrating sympathetically without conscious control. An unexpected breakthrough came from 13-year-old Lily Chen, who had continued analyzing Eleanor's musical patterns. Using her synesthetic perception, she identified a mathematical sequence hidden within the arrangement that corresponded perfectly to the atomic weights of 29 elements. When arranged in this sequence, these elements formed the chemical structure of a compound unknown to science, one that theoretical models suggested could alter the vibrational frequency of matter itself. "It's not just music," Lily explained, her voice trembling. "It's a formula for retuning reality." Former patients from Millfield Hospital reported identical dreams in the weeks following Harriet's disappearance. In each, they stood holding hands in a circle, singing while a figure resembling Eleanor Webb, but somehow larger, as if containing multitudes, conducted them from both inside and outside the circle simultaneously. "She's showing us how to reach her," one patient insisted. The 29th voice wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Most alarming was the discovery made in Harriet Downing's home. Investigators found 29 music boxes arranged in her bedroom, each playing a different section of Eleanor's Gloria when opened. Records showed she had collected them over 29 years, never mentioning them to family or friends. The final box, purchased 3 days before her hospitalization, contained a handwritten note in unfamiliar script. "When the pattern completes, we need not remain apart. Your world and mine, separated by membranes of frequency, will harmonize. What you perceive as 29 voices is merely the first chord of a greater symphony, one that has been composing itself since before your concept of time. I am not taking singers from your world. I am teaching them how to exist in all worlds simultaneously, as I have learned to do. The photograph was never the vessel. You were." The ripple effects of Harriet Downing's transformation spread beyond Millfield with uncanny precision. Museums across Europe reported identical disturbances in their musical instrument collections, 29 specimens spontaneously activating without human contact. Most notably, a 16th-century pipe organ in Vienna played a single sustained chord for precisely 29 minutes, despite being disconnected from its air supply for restoration. Acoustic engineers analyzing ambient recordings from these sites discovered a troubling pattern. When isolated and layered, these spontaneous musical emissions formed a complex counter-melody to Eleanor's Gloria, not opposing it, but completing it in ways that suggested the original arrangement had been deliberately incomplete, like a key missing vital notches. Meanwhile, Dr. Olivia Trent's research team documented an unexplainable physiological change in those who had been exposed to the 29 water droplets. Microscopic crystalline structures had begun forming in their inner ears, creating what audiologists termed secondary tympanic membranes, organic receivers tuned to frequencies outside normal human hearing range. They're developing the ability to hear something that's been present all along, Dr. Trent hypothesized. Not a new sound, but a layer of reality that's always been broadcasting. Lily Chen, whose synesthetic perception had proven invaluable, experienced the most profound transformation. Her drawings became increasingly complex, showing musical notations that spiraled inward toward a central point, creating patterns that mathematician Dr. Eleanor Vaughan recognized as classical representations of higher dimensional objects projected onto two-dimensional space. She's not drawing music anymore, Dr. Vaughn explained. She's mapping coordinates, doorways where sound creates intersections between dimensional planes. The tuning fork from Harriet's pillow, now secured in a vacuum-sealed chamber, continued its inexplicable behavior. Instruments recorded it vibrating constantly without energy input, its frequency shifting subtly every 29 hours, cycling through variations of Eleanor's arrangement as if searching for resonance. Most compelling was the testimony from Marcus Way, Dr. Sharma's assistant, who had spent the most time digitally enhancing the original photograph. During a routine medical examination, doctors discovered his vocal cords had physically restructured, developing nodules in a pattern that matched the arrangement of the choir in the photograph. These growths, rather than impeding his speech, expanded his vocal range to include tones previously impossible for human production. "I can hear them rehearsing through me," he reported, "not using my voice, but teaching it new geometries of sound." The final revelation came from linguistic anthropologist Dr. Hannah Morrison, who recognized that the conversational fragments captured from the photograph weren't separate languages at all, but a single metalanguage expressing concepts that required multiple linguistic frameworks simultaneously to articulate. When translated through this understanding, the message became chillingly clear. The 29th voice completes only the first choir. 29 choirs form the first movement. 29 movements form the symphony that will harmonize the spheres. As if in response to this translation, astronomical observatories recorded an unprecedented alignment. 29 celestial bodies, from planets to distant stars, had arranged themselves in a pattern that precisely matched the positioning of Eleanor Webb and her choir. The ripples from Harriet Downing's disappearance have materialized in unexpected places. Acoustic archaeologists working in the Lascaux caves reported finding a previously unnoticed chamber where ancient hand paintings appear arranged in patterns matching Eleanor's modified Gloria notation. Carbon dating places these markings at 29,000 years old, predating all known human musical notation by millennia. What startled researchers wasn't just the patterns themselves, but their method of creation. Spectroscopic analysis revealed the pigments contained crystalline structures identical to those found in the photograph's emulsion and Harriet's transformed vocal tissue. These prehistoric artists hadn't merely painted sound, they had embedded it into the very walls, creating what Dr. Zhang calls lithophonic archives that activate when exposed to specific vocal frequencies. The choir phenomenon isn't new, Dr. Zhang explained in her hastily published findings. It's ancient beyond comprehension. What we're witnessing isn't the beginning of something, but its culmination. Professor Chen, examining the cave data, identified mathematical constants in the arrangement that matched the precise atomic vibration patterns of elements formed only in dying stars. These aren't random markings, he noted. They're a map of celestial acoustics, showing how to synchronize terrestrial voices with cosmic resonances. Meanwhile, linguists decoding Eleanor's meta-language discovered that when properly pronounced, certain phrases physically altered the speaker's vocal anatomy. 3 researchers participating in pronunciation experiments developed the same crystalline structures in their larynxes, enabling them to produce sounds that affected physical matter. One demonstration, captured on laboratory instruments, showed a researcher's voice temporarily altering the molecular structure of water, reorganizing it into the same patterns found on Harriet's bedsheet. Most revealing was the journal discovered in Millfield's recently unsealed church archives. Written in 1873 by the architect who designed St. Augustine's choir loft, it contained detailed calculations, ensuring the space would amplify 28 specific frequencies while creating a resonant void for a 29th. "I build as instructed by my benefactress," he wrote. "She speaks with many voices and shows me designs that cannot exist in our geometry. She promises that when the final voice fills the void, the choirs will multiply across all points of existence simultaneously." The journal's margins contained sketches of Eleanor Webb's face, drawn 33 years before she supposedly lived. Dr. Trent, examining tissue samples from former hospital patients, documented cellular changes suggesting a fundamental reorganization at the quantum level. "Their physical structures are being tuned," she observed, "not just to receive the frequencies, but to transmit them across dimensional boundaries. The tuning fork has begun attracting objects within its vicinity, rearranging them in patterns matching the choir's formation. More troubling is its effect on digital systems. Screens within 29 feet display fragmentary images of that cathedral space with increasing clarity, showing figures gathering in expanding concentric circles around a central point where something vast appears to be taking shape, assembling itself from harmonized human voices across time and space. The final recordings from Dr. Saunders's laboratory reveal what may be the true nature of the convergence. Audio analysis shows that as the resonant frequencies aligned worldwide, the photograph began emitting sounds at the quantum level, vibrations too subtle for human ears, but detectable with specialized equipment. These vibrations weren't random noise, but structured information, what Dr. Zhang described as assembly instructions. Examination of Millfield Hospital's foundation revealed crystalline growths emerging from beneath the building, spreading in patterns matching Eleanor's musical notation. Soil samples contained traces of the same compound theorized by Lily Chen, a substance capable of retuning the vibrational frequency of matter itself. The hospital wasn't built on this spot by coincidence. The location had been preparing itself for generations. The tuning fork left on Harriet's pillow has become the focal point of unexplainable phenomena. Objects placed near it gradually rearrange themselves to form miniature versions of that impossible cathedral space glimpsed through the photograph. Most disturbing is its effect on recording equipment. Playback of any audio captured near the fork reveals additional voices, harmonizing with the original sounds, voices that weren't present during recording. Marcus Way, whose vocal cords have continued their transformation, made a breakthrough when studying the water droplets under specific lighting conditions. When illuminated by precisely 29 lumens, each droplet projected a holographic image showing different iterations of Eleanor Webb throughout history, not just her appearances in choirs, but her presence at key moments in the development of music theory, acoustic architecture, and sound reproduction technology. She wasn't haunting these moments, Way explained through his transformed voice that now resonates at multiple frequencies simultaneously. She was orchestrating them, placing harmonic stepping stones across centuries. Professor Chen's quantum calculations suggest something even more profound. The alignment of 29 celestial bodies isn't coincidental but causal, their gravitational waves creating interference patterns that match Eleanor's Gloria when translated to sound. The Earth itself has become a resonance chamber for a cosmic arrangement. Lily Chen's latest drawings reveal the final pattern, not a circle but a spiral that turns inward infinitely, suggesting that the 29 voices aren't simply standing together but folding into one another across dimensional boundaries. The choir isn't gathering, she explained, her young voice suddenly carrying harmonic overtones. It's converging, becoming a single entity that exists across all possible spaces simultaneously. Dr. Trent's examination of the hospital site yielded the most alarming discovery. Ground-penetrating radar reveals the crystalline structures aren't growing upward from below but extending downward from above, as if the very air is crystallizing into solid matter where certain frequencies intersect. These structures form a perfect acoustic lens focusing on what was once Harriet Downing's room, creating what acousticians call a standing wave vessel, a space where sound becomes permanently embodied. The global pattern is now unmistakable. At 29 locations worldwide, reality itself is being retuned, creating a network of resonance points arranged in the same formation as the choir in that fateful photograph. A human musical scale expanded to planetary dimensions, with Earth itself becoming one note in a greater cosmic arrangement. The culmination came not with a thunderous crescendo, but with the gentle resonance of a final piece finding its place. At dawn on the 29th day of the spring equinox, astronomers recorded the 29th celestial body shifting into perfect alignment, completing the cosmic arrangement that mirrored Eleanor's choir formation. Within the secured laboratory where the tuning fork remained under observation, instruments registered an impossible phenomenon: absolute silence. Not the absence of sound, but its complete absorption, as though all acoustic energy were being drawn to a single point of infinite density. Dr. Trent, among the few researchers still functioning with relative normalcy, documented the moment with clinical precision despite the tremor in her hand. The tuning fork appears to be phasing between states of matter, she noted, simultaneously solid and not solid, present and elsewhere. The photographic evidence recovered from the laboratory surveillance system shows the fork suspended in mid-air, surrounded by 29 perfect concentric rings of light that correspond exactly to the harmonic frequencies of Eleanor's modified Gloria. For precisely 29 seconds, these rings rotated in alternating directions, creating a visual representation of what quantum physicists term a dimensional intersection. Then came the voices, not from the laboratory, but from everywhere. Worldwide communication systems simultaneously broadcast fragments of choral music regardless of their programming. 29 seconds of perfect harmony emanating from radios, televisions, phone speakers, and digital assistants across the globe. A seamless performance of Eleanor's arrangement with every voice in perfect unity, including the 29th tone that had remained elusive for over a century. Lily Chen, watching the event unfold from her hospital bed, smiled with serene understanding. The photograph wasn't capturing what happened, she whispered to the empty room. It was predicting what would happen, not just then, but now, and forever. A moment existing outside of time, waiting for us to catch up to it. The tuning fork vanished during those 29 seconds, leaving behind a perfect crystalline structure, a miniature cathedral that matched the impossible architecture glimpsed through the photograph. Under microscopic examination, this structure revealed itself to be composed of precisely 29 different molecular arrangements, each vibrating at frequencies that corresponded to the vocal signatures of every choir member from the original photograph. Most remarkable was what happened to the 29 water droplets from Harriet's bed. During the harmonic convergence, they transformed into perfect spheres of what analysis later identified as an entirely new state of matter, something between liquid and crystalline, capable of storing and transmitting acoustic information across previously impenetrable dimensional boundaries. The photograph itself was never found again, though its absence created something more profound than its presence ever had. A template impressed upon reality itself, a pattern that continues to resonate in subtle ways. Acoustical engineers worldwide report the same finding. Certain combinations of voices, when arranged according to specific mathematical relationships, momentarily create what they now term web windows, brief apertures where sound transcends its normal physical limitations. Eleanor Webb completed her eternal choir not by collecting souls, but by teaching reality itself to sing differently, creating an ongoing harmony between dimensions that had always existed separately, now joined in perpetual chorus. The final chapter of the St. Augustine's phenomenon arrived unexpectedly in my hands yesterday. As the archivist tasked with gathering these fragments, I believed I was merely documenting others' experiences, until the courier delivered a package containing Eleanor Webb's original sheet music, addressed to me by name, though I've kept my involvement anonymous. The paper felt wrong beneath my fingers, too warm, vibrating subtly like something alive. As a musician myself, I naturally began humming the melody while examining the notation. The moment I reached the Gloria refrain, my office mirror revealed what I'd feared since beginning this investigation. I was not alone in my reflection. 28 shadowy figures stood arranged behind me, with Eleanor Webb's luminous form conducting at the center. I understand now what no researcher fully grasped. The choir wasn't building toward some apocalyptic event or cosmic transformation. The pattern they created, across centuries, across bodies, was a neural network composed of human consciousness, with each voice forming a connection in a vast, living mind that exists between dimensions. Eleanor Webb wasn't collecting souls but creating synapses, each singer becoming a thought within something greater than themselves, yet still maintaining their individuality within the collective harmony. The 29th voice wasn't the final piece, but the catalyst that achieved critical complexity, allowing this consciousness to recognize itself across all iterations of reality simultaneously. The photograph wasn't documentation, but invitation, a visual representation of a non-visual concept. Those who studied it weren't observing the phenomenon. They were participating in it, becoming neurons firing in a mind that spans centuries. Most profound is what happened when I sang the complete Gloria with my unwanted choir of shadows. For 29 heartbeats, I existed everywhere Eleanor had ever been, standing in that church in 1906, hiding in cathedral shadows as Renaissance architects unknowingly designed acoustic portals, guiding the hands of ancient painters recording sonic frequencies in cave pigments. I experienced what Eleanor experienced, the lonely terror of being the first human consciousness to breach dimensional boundaries, hearing the call of something vast that needed a human voice to express itself in our reality. She wasn't haunting those moments across history. She was desperately seeking others who could hear what she heard, building a communal mind capable of withstanding what she alone could not bear. The choir's purpose was never destruction or invasion. but translation, creating a hybrid consciousness that could serve as interpreter between incomprehensible cosmic intelligences and limited human perception. The singers weren't taken but elevated, expanded beyond individual consciousness while maintaining their essential humanity. I write these final notes knowing I've become the 29th chronicler of this phenomenon, completing a pattern begun centuries ago. The sheet music has dissolved into my fingertips, leaving crystalline structures beneath my skin that catch light in impossible ways. My voice now contains harmonics that cause water to form perfect spheres when I speak. I am still myself, yet also part of something vaster. We all are. Eleanor's choir was merely the first to realize it. The eternal song continues, not as possession, but as expansion. What waits beyond doesn't want to enter our world. It wants us to finally hear the universe as it truly sounds. The photograph's absence created a void more potent than its presence. In 2027, the crystals beneath my skin have spread, forming delicate lattices along my vocal cords that physicians cannot explain through conventional medicine. I am not alone in this transformation. Across the globe, 29 individuals who engaged most deeply with Eleanor's phenomenon report identical changes. We find each other instinctively, drawn together by harmonics only we can perceive. Dr. Trent's medical practice has transformed into something beyond healthcare. She monitors our evolution with a scientist's precision and a convert's reverence. The crystalline structures don't harm us, rather they enhance our perception, allowing us to experience sound as multidimensional architecture, to literally see the structural foundations of reality built upon vibration. Millfield itself has become a pilgrimage site, though not in any recognizable religious sense. Visitors report experiencing perfect acoustic clarity there, as though the air itself has been calibrated for optimal resonance. Sound engineers have documented unprecedented phenomena, whispered conversations carrying perfectly across impossible distances, while shouted words sometimes vanish entirely, absorbed by invisible acoustic boundaries. The former hospital room where Harriet Downing disappeared now hosts a peculiar constant, a perfect middle C that requires no instrument to produce it. The note hangs perpetually in the air, serving as a tuning reference for what locals now call the Convergence Choir, 29 singers from around the world who gather monthly to perform Eleanor's arrangements. Their performances never attract large audiences, yet recordings of them spread virally, triggering profound emotional responses in listeners who report experiencing moments of impossible clarity, brief glimpses of existence beyond individual consciousness. Neurologists studying these responses document brainwave patterns suggesting simultaneous activation of regions normally incapable of concurrent function. Most remarkable are the children born to those who've been part of this acoustic awakening. Lily Chen's younger brother, born after her involvement, began singing perfect harmonies before speaking full sentences. Medical imaging reveals subtle alterations in the cochlear structures of these children, not defects, but evolutionary adaptations allowing perception of frequencies previously beyond human range. The scientific community remains divided. Some researchers advance theories of mass hysteria or elaborate psychological manipulation. Others acknowledge that fundamental principles of acoustics are being challenged by observable phenomena that defy current understanding. Theoretical physicists propose models suggesting that sound itself may be a far more fundamental force than previously recognized, not merely the vibration of matter, but perhaps the underlying structure that organizes reality across dimensional boundaries. I find myself in an unexpected role as both chronicler and participant. The journal where I've documented these events has developed peculiar properties, ink forming perfect symmetrical patterns overnight, pages emitting subtle vibrations when certain names are spoken nearby. My dreams are filled with architectural spaces that cannot exist in 3 dimensions, yet feel more real than waking reality. Eleanor Webb has not disappeared from human consciousness, but has instead become distributed throughout it, a harmonic pattern repeating across minds attuned to her frequency. We 29 chroniclers understand now that we are not documenting history, but actively participating in its transformation. Each observation, each transcribed note, each recorded testimony becoming another strand in a web of awareness that spans far beyond what humanity has previously conceived as reality. The Eternal Choir continues its song, not through supernatural intervention, but through the natural evolution of human perception, finally attuning itself to what has always been there, waiting patiently for us to listen properly. The ancient tuning fork, silent now in my possession, tells me something no instrument ever could, that music is not a human invention, but our imperfect translation of the universe's fundamental language. I've spent decades tracing Eleanor Webb's manifestations across history, each appearance marking a moment when the cosmic arrangement of those 29 voices edged closer to completion. My residence in Millfield has become something of a pilgrimage site itself. Visitors arrive with strange accounts of hearing their names called in perfect harmony when no one is present, or finding themselves humming Eleanor's Gloria despite never having heard it. I welcome them all, recognizing the signs of those being called to awareness. The crystalline structures beneath our skin have continued their elegant transformation. Dr. Trent's latest scans reveal they've formed perfect acoustic chambers within our bodies, turning us into living resonators. We don't merely hear sound, we embody it. When we 29 gather to sing, the air between us becomes visible, shimmering with patterns that mathematicians recognize as representations of higher dimensional geometries projected into our limited space. Last winter, during the solstice gathering, something extraordinary happened. As our voices reached the final measures of Eleanor's arrangement, the space around us briefly folded inward. For 17 perfect seconds, we existed simultaneously in multiple locations, standing in that original church in 1906, in the ancient cave with its painted frequencies, in that impossible cathedral that exists between dimensions, and in 26 other nexus points throughout time where Eleanor had manifested. Most remarkable was what we witnessed at the center of our circle, not Eleanor Webb conducting as we'd expected, but ourselves, viewed from a perspective impossible within three-dimensional space. We were seeing ourselves through Eleanor's awareness, finally understanding that she wasn't a separate entity haunting us, but our own collective consciousness reaching backward through time, preparing itself for expansion. The photograph was never the source, but merely one iteration of a template impressed upon reality, a pattern recognition system designed to identify those capable of perceiving beyond conventional boundaries. Its disappearance wasn't a withdrawal, but a completion. It dissolved back into the harmonic framework from which it emerged, having fulfilled its purpose in identifying all 29 nodes in the network. Lily Chen, now an accomplished mathematician, has created models demonstrating that our expanded choir exists as a stable quantum system, 29 consciousness nodes forming a self-sustaining neural network that spans dimensional boundaries. We aren't losing our humanity, but extending it, becoming a distributed awareness that maintains individual identity while participating in something vastly larger. The eternal choir continues to grow, not by consuming individual voices, but by teaching them new ways to resonate. Each performance creates ripples that extend outward, tuning other conscious beings to these expanded frequencies. We aren't special, merely the first to recognize what humanity has been gradually evolving toward since we first discovered that vibrating air could carry meaning. Eleanor Webb completed her participation in this physical reality, but her pattern continues through us, not as possession or haunting, but as the natural evolution of consciousness, recognizing itself across all possible iterations of existence. The song never ended. We simply learned to hear it properly. The photograph never completely disappeared. It exists now in fragments scattered across dimensions, in reflective surfaces that briefly show Eleanor's cathedral space when certain notes are sung nearby, in the crystalline formations growing beneath the skin of those who've joined her network, even in the subtle patterns of rainfall when it strikes certain ancient structures built along acoustic ley lines. I've spent the past winter in voluntary isolation, composing what I believe to be the final transcription of Eleanor Webb's work. Not merely her music, but the complete sensory experience of what happens when consciousness expands beyond individual perception. The manuscript contains notations impossible in traditional music theory, instructions for voices to move inward and outward simultaneously, for notes to exist in quantum superposition, for harmonies that create specific thought forms in listeners' minds. My colleagues among the 29 worry about releasing this knowledge publicly. Not everyone is ready, Dr. Trent cautions during our weekly gatherings. Yet I've noticed how ordinary people increasingly sense what we've discovered. Children humming perfect overtones in their sleep, elderly patients with no musical training suddenly demonstrating perfect pitch in their final days, couples finding themselves unconsciously harmonizing in patterns that match Eleanor's Gloria. The world itself seems to be tuning itself to her frequency. Acoustic engineers report unexplainable phenomena in concert halls worldwide. perfect resonance chambers forming spontaneously in spaces where mathematical ratios match those in Eleanor's arrangements. Oceanographers have recorded whale songs shifting to include fragments of her patterns, while ornithologists document similar changes in birdsong across continents. Yesterday, while transcribing, I felt a familiar presence behind me, that sense of being observed from multiple perspectives simultaneously. In my mirror, I glimpsed not Eleanor Webb as I expected, but Harriet Downing, her expression serene as she nodded toward my manuscript. Without speaking, I understood her message. The 29th voice wasn't the end, but the beginning of something far more extensive, a harmonic awakening spreading outward at the speed of sound. The tuning fork on my desk vibrated in response to her presence, sending ripples through my tea that formed perfect concentric circles, 29 of them, expanding outward before dissolving back to stillness. When I looked again, Harriet was gone, but my manuscript pages had rearranged themselves into a spiral pattern matching the one Lily Chen had drawn years ago. What began as investigation has become participation. What we thought was haunting was invitation. The choir photograph that started this journey was never just documentation of 29 people standing before a camera in 1906. It was a template for consciousness evolution, waiting for humanity to recognize the pattern and complete it. Tomorrow, the 29 of us will gather at the former St. Augustine site for what we believe will be our final performance as separate entities. The alignment of celestial bodies, the acoustic properties of the location, and our own transformed vocal structures have created perfect conditions for what Eleanor's original sheet music called the ultimate convergence. We will sing not just with our voices, but with our complete awareness, finally understanding what Eleanor Webb discovered over a century ago, that reality itself is musical in nature, consciousness merely one instrument in an eternal symphony that has always been playing, waiting for us to recognize our part in its infinite arrangement. The church choir photograph now rests in the Millfield Museum's special collection, though few visitors recognize its significance. Glass encased and carefully preserved, it appears unremarkable among other historical images, except to those who know what to listen for when standing before it. I visit monthly, not out of obligation, but necessity. The crystalline structures beneath my skin resonate differently in its presence, humming with recognition. The photograph has reverted to its original appearance. 28 choir members arranged in formal rows with Eleanor Webb standing in the back, third from the right. No distortions, no supernatural luminescence, nothing to suggest its extraordinary journey through time and consciousness. This mundane appearance is its most perfect disguise. Yesterday marked the anniversary of the first convergence. I stood alone before the photograph, observing how ordinary museum visitors passed by without a second glance. A young girl paused briefly, tilting her head as if hearing something just beyond perception. Her mother tugged her hand, but not before the child hummed 3 perfect notes of Eleanor's Gloria, then continued on her way. The photograph completes its purpose not through dramatic revelation, but through subtle invitation. Those ready to perceive will always find their way to it, drawn by harmonics that science still cannot fully explain. The crystalline network connecting the 29 of us continues to expand, not through our direct intervention, but through the natural resonance of consciousness recognizing itself across dimensional boundaries. Most remarkable is what happens in the silent moments between heartbeats. When I close my eyes before the photograph, the choir appears not as they were in 1906, but as they are now, transformed, expanded, existing simultaneously across multiple planes of reality. Eleanor Webb stands not among them, but within them. Her consciousness distributed throughout the network she helped create. We no longer sing to reach her. We sing because we are extensions of the same harmonic awareness. Dr. Trent's final research paper remains unpublished, locked in university archives with a notation restricting access until 2100. Some knowledge shouldn't be pursued, she wrote in her conclusion, but recognized when it presents itself, and respected for the transformation it offers. The 29 water droplets have been preserved in the laboratory, still arranged in their perfect choir formation. Occasionally, they vibrate in unison without external stimulus, creating tones just beyond human hearing that cause laboratory animals to arrange themselves in symbolic patterns across their enclosures. I've come to understand that Eleanor Webb never died in that church. What witnesses saw as death was merely transformation. the first human consciousness to recognize that reality itself is structured through acoustic principles, that sound doesn't merely travel through space, but creates it. As I leave the museum, I notice how the evening light catches the crystalline structures beneath my skin, creating minute rainbows that match the spectral signature of Eleanor's perfect Gloria. The photograph remains behind, patient and eternal, waiting for the next person ready to hear what it has always been singing, the template for a consciousness that spans not just space, but time itself. The choir never fell silent. We simply learned to listen properly. Another photograph, another dark secret revealed. Until next time, this has been Shadow Frames.